Good morning. Thought I'd try this tack of putting something up in the live and then seeing who assembles. It is Indigenous Peoples Day. It is Mantra Monday. It is Monday, October 12th. The year seems to be flying by. So I think you're going to like this verse today. As always, it's kind of a logical continuation of the things that have gone before it. And as always, I'm going to read the Sanskrit and then I'm going to read the word-for-word translation and then the purport, try and give some insights. This is the divine conversation between Prince Arjuna and Kṛṣṇa on the battlefield of Kurukshetra, and we are only 7 verses away from opulence of the absolute, which is this chapter, coming to a close, and then it moves on to the universal form. So get a little sip of my beverages here. How's everyone doing this morning, or whenever it is that you watch this? I hope that you're okay. I hope that you're staying safe. All right, so let's get into it. Text 34. Mṛtyuḥ sarva-haraś cāham, udbhavaś bhaviṣyatām, kīrtiḥ śrīr vakcha nārīṇāṁ, smṛtir medhā dhṛtiḥ kṣamā. Mṛtyuḥ sarva-haraś cāham, udbhavaś bhaviṣyatām, kīrtiḥ śrīr vakcha nārīṇāṁ, smṛtir medhā dhṛtiḥ kṣamā. All right, so now I'm going to sing it. Mṛtyuḥ sarva-haraś cāham, udbhavaś bhaviṣyatām, kīrtiḥ śrīr vakcha nārīṇāṁ, smṛtir medhā dhṛtiḥ kṣamā. Mṛtyuḥ sarva-haraś cāham, udbhavaś bhaviṣyatām, kīrtiḥ śrīr vakcha nārīṇāṁ, smṛtir medhā dhṛtiḥ kṣamā. Mṛtyuḥ sarva-haraś cāham, udbhavaś bhaviṣyatām, kīrtiḥ śrīr vakcha nārīṇāṁ, smṛtir medhā dhṛtiḥ kṣamā. Word for word translation. Mṛtyuḥ, death. Sarva-haraś, all-devouring. Cha, also. Aham, I am. Udbhavaś, generations. Cha, also. Bhaviṣyatām, of future manifestations. Kīrtiḥ, fame. Śrīḥ, opulence or beauty. Vak, fine speech. Cha, also. Nārīṇāṁ, of women. smṛtir, memory. Medhā, intelligence. dhṛtiḥ, firmness. kṣamā, patience. Translation. I am all-devouring death, and I am the generating principle of all that is to be. Among women I am fame, fortune, fine speech, memory, intelligence, steadfastness, and patience. Here is the purport from Bhagavad Gita as it is. And the purport is by, and the translation is by Bhaktivedanta Swami Prabhupada. As soon as a man is born, he dies at every moment. Thus death is devouring every living entity at every moment. But the last stroke itself is called death. The death is Kṛṣṇa. As for future development, all living entities undergo 6 basic changes. They are born, they grow, they remain for some time, they reproduce, they dwindle, and finally, they vanish. Dehinosmin yatha dehe, komaram yovanam jara, tatra dehantaras praptir, diras tatra namuyati. Of these changes, the first is deliverance from the womb, and that is Kṛṣṇa. The first generation is the beginning of all future activities. The 7 opulences listed, fame, fortune, fine speech, memory, intelligence, steadfastness, and patience, are considered feminine. If a person possesses all of them or some of them, he becomes glorious. Sanskrit is a perfect language and is therefore very glorious. If after studying one can remember a subject matter, he is gifted with a good memory, or smṛtir, and the ability not only to read many books on different subject matters, but to understand them and apply them when necessary is intelligence, or medhā, another opulence. The ability to overcome unsteadiness is called firmness, or steadfastness, dhṛtiḥ. And when one is fully qualified, yet is humble and gentle, and when one is able to keep his balance, both in sorrow and in the ecstasy of joy, he has the opulence called patience, or kṣamā. So, there's a lot of life and a lot of life lessons and a lot of instructions packed into this mantra today. So, you heard me quote a verse from actually one of the songs on my album Yoga on the Dance Floor, but the origin of that verse is the Bhagavad Gita as it is, and it is considered to be one of the 30 key verses, and it's important because it helps put into perspective what death is in relationship to the soul. So, dehi nosmin yata dehe komaram yovanam jara tatra dehantara smṛtir dhiras tatra namuyati. So that means, the translation of that is, just as one develops from youth to boyhood to old age, so similarly the soul passes at the time of death into a new body, giving up the old body just the way one would give up old and useless clothing. So that is the perspective that we need to have in order to get through these different stages of life. And here, Kṛṣṇa is saying, I am all-devouring death, and I am the generating principle of all that is yet to be. So just like in verse 32, where Kṛṣṇa says, of all creations, I am the beginning and the end, here we see that mirrored in this verse as well. So there is death, but there is also the generating principle of all that is yet to be. That is the children. What is really essential to come to the realization of here is that death is Kṛṣṇa. So, what does that mean practically for someone who is aspiring on the path of self-realization? That means that instead of seeing death as something to be feared, one actually sees death, that transition that we go through, as one's friend. So, someone who has gotten to the point of self-realization, it is said that they actually step on the head of death, that mṛtyuḥ actually pays the obeisances so the devotee can literally step on the head of death as he is liberated, as he ascends or becomes reinstated in his spiritual position, in the spiritual atmosphere. So if you've been cultivating this understanding, all of your life, then you don't see death as something fearful, just as the way a kitten doesn't see the jaws of the cat as something being fearful. So you'll see that mother cats, they have a litter. They need to move the kittens around, when they're very young, put them in safety. So they will pick them up by the scruff of the neck and move them. And of course, for the kitten, this isn't a fearful thing. This is just the mother taking care. However, for a mouse, the jaws of the same cat is extremely frightening, literally represents death. They do not have that relationship, with. So the analogy here, obviously, is that we want to cultivate that relationship. So I guess you could say that it is almost like an embrace. It's making me remember a story of actually my great-grandmother when she called her son, she called my grandfather, to basically tell him that she was going to be leaving her body, within 12 hours, She knew that. And my grandfather, wasn't home. No, he was home. He did return the call. And he said, well, I'm going to come and see you, I'll come and see you in a day or something. And she said, oh, well, I won't be here. I'll be in my boyfriend's arms. So she affectionately referred to Jesus as being her boyfriend. So I thought that was a very, endearing and kind of tender illustration of what that transition can feel like or what it can look like from this side, instead of viewing it as fear, in a fearful way. As for future development, all living entities undergo 6 basic changes. They are born, they grow, they remain for some time, they reproduce, they dwindle, and finally they vanish. Of these changes, the first is deliverance from the womb, and that is Kṛṣṇa. The first generation is the beginning of all future activities. So there you have it. So there is this cycle, there is death, and there is birth, and there is death, and there is birth, and so on, and so on, and so on. So we have to have a firm grasp and understanding of this. This is also, death brings life, life brings death. There is the process of samsara. There's this process in the circle, kind of a merry-go-round that we're actually trying to step out of and get out of through this process of devotion, through this process of bhakti yoga. So I guess you could say we can actually really start living our lives instead of always being worried about the cutoff point. Then the purport goes on to say that the 7 opulences listed, fame, fortune, fine speech, memory, intelligence, steadfastness, and patience, are considered feminine. If a person possesses all of them or some of them, he becomes glorious. So let me see, I pulled up a couple of different images here. So this is an image of Sojourner Truth. So she is famous for her speech. She is famous for her fine speech, and she is certainly a woman, and the name of her talk was Ain't I a Woman? That's how it's remembered. So just through this process, she's a good example of someone who just through the process of fine speech, of oratory, has become well-known, has become prominent, has become famous. Of course, there are many examples of this. Martin Luther King's speech, I Have a Dream, still resonates today, and he spoke that, my God, that was spoken about 50 years ago, and it still resonates today. So this is considered to be feminine. Someone who possesses them becomes glorious. If a man is famous as a righteous man, that makes him glorious. Sanskrit is a perfect language and is therefore very glorious. If after studying one can remember a subject matter, he is gifted with a good memory, or smṛtir. So smṛtir is the ability to remember, but it is the ability to not only, it is the ability to apply. And the ability not only to read many books on different subjects, but to understand them and apply them when necessary is intelligence, is medhā, which is another opulence. So actually, let me, reconfigure what I just said. So smṛti is important, right? Memory is important because it feeds your intelligence, and your intelligence is what you need to be able to get yourself out of a jam. But it's not just book knowledge. It is applied knowledge. It is knowledge that you can actually use when you find yourself in a situation. So that is the importance of shravanam kirtanam, the importance of hearing and chanting. So it's interesting. Kīrtiḥ, fame. This word seems to be related to kirtaniya, right? To sing, to glorify. Then he goes on to say that this intelligence or medhā, the ability to apply it, this is another opulence. Then the ability to overcome unsteadiness is called firmness or steadfastness, which is called dhṛtiḥ. So, there's some different country songs or songs that talk about this quality of steadfastness in a woman, or the desirability of having that quality, like Stand By Your Man, for example. So it's recognized and it's acknowledged that this ability to be able to simply persevere through the ups and downs of life. He goes on to say here, the ups and downs of life, and just to be steady throughout all of them. This is a form of strength. It's very, very important. It is a basis and it is a foundation by which to be able to persevere, to be able to continue, to be able to lend strength, to someone else. It could be your husband, it could be your children, it could be your community. Very important. And then he says that when one is fully qualified, yet is humble and gentle, and when one is able to keep his balance both in sorrow and in the ecstasy of joy, he has the opulence called patience or kṣamā. So this is something that comes up a lot for a yogi. So, spiritual life isn't just all a bed of roses, right? Or life isn't just a bed of roses, as we know. There is tragedy, there is sorrow, there is grief, there is stuff that happens that is unforeseen. But there is also joy. There's beauty. It could be like the birth of a child, for example, or it could be the death of a child, right? There is this duality that exists here in the material world. So the ability to have that quality of kṣamā or patience, which can be cultivated, is extremely important, because all these qualities, taken together along with this humility and this gentleness is what gets us through. That's what makes us the long distance runner, and what gives us the ability to make us be able to reach our goal. The other thing which is noteworthy here in this verse is that he specifically takes the time to point out these qualities of humility and gentility, because that is what endears you to other people. There's lots of people that know a lot of things, but how are they delivering that? How are they giving that? Are they being arrogant and puffed up about it? I know more than you. This is actually a pitfall in the mode of goodness. Once you attain the mode of goodness, one can actually become proud of one's knowledge. That is another manifestation of the false ego. Or if one is in the transcendental mode of goodness, in Suddha-sattva, there is none of that. There is a humility. When you examine the lives of any of the Mahajans, like Prahlad Maharaj, for example, he was extremely learned. He came out of the womb self-realized. He came out of the womb learned, because he had been listening to all the mantras, all the teachings, all the Vedic knowledge, in utero by the grace of Narada Muni, by the grace of his guru, his spiritual master. But, whenever he was praised, as being such a great devotee, he would decry that and say, that's not true. That is not true. If I were, then the Lord would be around me all the time. So this is a symptom actually of a self-realized soul, is they actually consider themselves to be not great. So when Chaitanya Mahaprabhu talks about that quality of feeling oneself more taller than a tree and lower than the straw on the street, more humble than a blade of grass. This is what he is talking about. This is what he is referring to. But the beautiful part of true humility is that it is also extremely attractive to the other living entities, which is a wonderful thing because it's like a touchstone. It has the ability to melt the heart and give another person the impetus, the desire, to want to become like that person. So now just imagine if all of us in this world were exhibiting the opulences of humility and gentleness, along with intelligence and applied wisdom and learning and patience and steadfastness. That would be quite something. I also want to touch on the other quality that is mentioned here, what Kṛṣṇa is among women. And the second thing he mentions is actually fortune. So I brought up this slide here of the goddess of fortune, of Lakshmi Devi. So you see Lakshmi Devi, she is dressed in very opulent clothing. She has a pot of gold right next to her. Of course, she is holding the lotus flower, that is a benediction. And she is always to be found at the lotus feet of her husband, Lord Vishnu, Lakshmi Devi. So it's interesting that in Vedic culture, that fortune or wealth is actually considered to be something feminine. So this is making me remember that traditionally it was the woman that would handle the household finances. She would be in charge and overseeing the income and also what was going out for the household, and that everything that was well stocked and well taken care of. Of course, according to her position, according to her, financial status, the financial status that she held, as a married lady. But this is very, very interesting. Whereas here in the West, we have a slightly different view of it. Of course, we'd say, there's no romance without finance. So it's understood that women and money are two things that go together. In order to get the honey, you got to have the money. But women aren't necessarily seen as being empowered or as being powerful in terms of handling money and handling finances. So the opposite is true in Vedic culture, and I think that's very important and very cool to understand. What else can I say here? Fame. The 7 opulences listed fame. Well, of course, I have to bring up a picture of Marilyn Monroe to talk about fame. Here is someone who was endowed with great beauty and charisma, and she certainly is very famous. I mean, Marilyn has been gone for a very long time now, but I think she's a very good example of Kṛṣṇa manifesting himself as fame among women. She's got this star power, she's got this kind of eternality about her. So What else can I say? Is anyone here? Does anyone have any questions? I saw someone kind of pop in and pop off here. Okay, let me just, and of course, the obvious is that women are the ones who give birth. They are the ones who give birth to everyone, male or female, or the feminine gender of a species. So that's very interesting because there is actually an illustration of the cycle of samsara, the cycle of birth and death, right? The great mother, giving life and also taking away life. So time. Yep. So this, again, I am also inexhaustible time. So that was the verse last week where Kṛṣṇa mentions that he is kala. So all these verses, they all have a mirroring. There's all kind of a logic to it. And as you build out, it really creates a complete and holistic picture of the Lord's presence and the Lord's opulences, which is multidimensional. It's not just one or two layers, it's all pervading and it's baked into every aspect of existence. So it's good to remember these things. It's good to have the smṛtir, to remember these things, because it makes life less fearful and less uncertain. We can hang on to and find this point of entry to deepen our relationship, through this process of bhakti yoga. So before I go today, I just want to give a shout out and a thanks to Betsy A.L.O. Sanders, who picked up a Like Fire t-shirt over the weekend. Thank you very much. Of course, today is a national holiday, so the post office is closed. But Betsy, I want to let you know that your t-shirt and your package is going out to you tomorrow, Tuesday, and you should get it. You should have it by the end of the week. And I want to thank everyone who's purchased everything so far. I really, really appreciate it. The link to that is in my bio here on Instagram. The webpage is up. Have fun with it. There's also a karaoke activity on there as well. And when you scroll down to the bottom, you will see, the merchandise that's available. And also don't forget that you can still get $5 off the t-shirts until the end of the week, until Friday. I think a lot of people are waiting for payday. And the code that you can apply is called cover spin. So you want to plunk that in there in order to get $5 off. And also the shipping is very reasonable. I know prices have gone up at the post office, but if you're in the United States, the continental US, shipping is going to be $5. That's it. So that's all I have to say for this week, other than I appreciate you. I hope that you enjoyed this Mantra Monday. And be well, be safe, stay safe. And I will see you next week. A launch is coming up soon for something new for around the Halloween. So look out for that as well. Okay. Namaste. Until then, bye.